how my not forgiving affects others. So
can I say, we could also say in this title, how my refusal to forgive affects others.
Yes. Yeah. Because really I'm refusing when I'm not forgiving.
That's right. It's not like, I just haven't forgiven them yet. No, honestly, it's to do with desire.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is linked to desire. So if I'm not forgiving others, it's because I'm refusing to forgive others. There's no other reason. I'm refusing to do it.
Yeah. All right. So Sandra's statements in her letter indicate that she's got a lot of desires to not forgive people who've harmed her or who she perceives have harmed her. So that's the opposite of what love would do.
And if she was truly sincere, she would look at that and go, right, I've got to work through those desires, release whatever is the underlying emotional reason for them, and God will tell her what they are if she wants to know. But she'll need to go through the emotional process of releasing them.
It's not judging the desires, because that just takes us further away from actually releasing them.
Of course.
In fact, often we judge them to not have to deal with them.
That's the purpose of personal judgment, to refuse to go through a process.
So acknowledging, okay, my desires are out of harmony with what love would do. She also has a strong desire to see certain people as her enemies, who she has to oppose, and she doesn't want them to have any happiness or success. So there's a lot within that about not forgiving others. So I want to spend some time on how not forgiving, we've talked about how it harms me, but let's talk about how it harms other people.
Sure, yeah.
Who benefits when I refuse to forgive? Does anyone benefit when I refuse to forgive the people who've harmed me? So we can see this as people like the person who's harmed me, the other people who haven't harmed me. Does anyone benefit from me saying I'm not forgiving that person who harmed me?
No one.
No one.
Not a single person.
No.
Not a single person.
Yeah.
So refusing to forgive, you're not going to benefit a single person.
Yeah.
So that's interesting in itself, isn't it? Because there's a lot of reasons why that's the case, of course. I'm in complete disharmony with God's laws of correction. Like, I'm refusing to be even corrected. So the compensatory laws are going to have to work.
I'm also, and I'm in disharmony with the very way my soul is created to work.
Yeah, because it's created to release emotion, not store it.
Immediately that it's felt, it's created to feel it, and the process of not forgiving means shutting down. Yeah,
it's effort, time, energy, all gets lost.
Yeah, and that can't benefit anyone because I'm opposing.
So what a waste of time, what a waste of energy, what a waste of your life.
Yeah.
Like, it's just wastes it's wasteful. It's definitely not economical.
No.
It's the most wasteful thing you could do with your life, to hold on to a grudge or hold on to, what somebody's done to you.
Yeah. I'm definitely not trying to make other people happy. Not giving or receiving love. So
can't receive God's love.
Can't get God's love.
Because I'm refusing to forgive others. I can't ask for God's forgiveness of myself.
Yeah. And I am choosing to remain unloving towards the person who harmed me. Now that is my sin.
Exactly.
So I'm sinning now.
And I might even go to the point where I would try to punish them.
Yeah,
right.
Big sin.
Yeah.
So, of course, I know through even the laws of compensation, that's going to not benefit me or anyone else.
Yeah. And there's a high likelihood I'm going to act out all of the harm that's been done to me to somebody else who wasn't the original person who harmed me. So in other words, there's a high likelihood I'm going to act it out with innocent people.
Yeah. And I'd like to talk about that in depth in the next section.
Sure. Yeah. So, it's like who benefits from refusing to forgive? No one. Who benefits when I do forgive? Everyone. Potentially.
Yeah.
Because it depends on how they respond to the forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
But potentially everyone. If not everyone, at least me.
Yeah. And people who haven't harmed me. And we talk about that.
And people who haven't harmed me and who I haven't potentially harmed.
Yeah.
It all means they're relieved of any potential harm from me. So yeah, there's a lot of advantages to doing it, and but when I refuse to forgive, there's no advantages for doing that.
No.
None at all.
No.
And you can see in the world today the results of refusal to forgive it. It's quite plain, really, that there's no benefit to it.
No.
You know, we've got this continuing, never-ending cycles of violence that, you know, some of the nations have been fighting for thousands of years, literally.
And also there's a huge increase in issues such as depression, which comes from the suppression of emotion.
Exactly.
A lot of our technology is now almost completely designed around facilitating the avoidance of emotion. And that comes because people are so entrenched in their desire to not forgive that they need to continually seek out things that help them suppress emotionally.
Yeah, distraction.
Numbing, you know, obesity
Alcohol
is on
abuse,
the rise,
drug abuse,
food abuse,
all
kinds of abuse of others as well as ourselves, and it's very harmful, and it's all the results of
trying to suppress emotion.
Yeah, and it's almost like we facilitate. So my choosing not to forgive affects me and harms me. Then that choice causes me to take so many actions and seek out certain things and support certain industries, which then facilitates the same kind of shutdown towards forgiveness in much younger people who haven't yet even developed their will against it. They're just like responding to the environment, which is saying, don't forgive, don't forgive. So it's incredibly harmful to them.
This is why we end up supporting companies that, you know, rape the third world and harm the third world and so forth. It's all because of our refusal to forgive in the first place. You know, so big companies that, you know, like Apple and places like that, that are, you know, that have been gotten big from on the backs of a lot of destructive feelings towards the third world. We don't see any problem with it because that's what we feel, you know. Punish the people who don't deserve things.
Or our conscience might niggle us about it, but our desire to avoid our emotion and to receive the goods that are going to help me avoid my emotion in the most effective way, then that supersedes any kind of
And when we
feeling.
don't forgive, we get very selfish. We get very selfish. Because remember, the desire to not forgive is driven by the underlying dominant selfish emotion, which is to avoid your bad emotions, your emotions that you don't want to feel. So because it's driven by this underlying desire, naturally it's going to have some very terrible effects. So not only does it not benefit anyone, it has terrible negative effects on everybody.
It harms others.
It harms everybody. Whether you want to or not, you're doing it. Like, you know, most people who refuse to forgive go, oh, but I'm loving in other areas. No, you're not. I'm sorry. You're going to act out this stuff that you got going on with a lot of other people. You are. And particularly with your children if you've got them.
Refusing to forgive affects those who haven't harmed me. I feel this is a very important section we're going to talk about now. How does my choice to not forgive my abuser affect those who haven't hurt or harmed me?
Well, you know, again, this is a very open-ended question, isn't it? Because there's literally hundreds and hundreds of ways. But maybe if we could just summarise 3 and just so it gives people a bit of a picture.
So, do you want me to go? And then you can respond.
So, perhaps that's the way to proceed.
I'll reject or be mistrusting of people who haven't harmed me. And perhaps it's more correct to say I'm not going to be discerning about who might harm me and who will harm me.
Not only that, you believe everybody will. It's not even that you're not discerning. You just have this underlying belief because you haven't released the harm. You assume that everybody's going to harm you that way, you know. And it's a primary, basic, like almost animal-based assumption. It's very hard to change. It's very hard to change without release of emotion.
Absolutely. I've tried.
You can try.
You can like
You could try to do different.
You can almost critically analyse the behaviour the behaviour of the person that you're trying to get closer to, for example, or that you're in an interaction with. But there's this kind of primal part of your brain which is affected by the suppressed emotion.
Well, it's a primal part of your emotion now.
Yeah.
The emotion is there. It needs to be released, but you're not releasing it, but it's going to now dominate every thought you have, every feeling you have in an interaction with other people. Yeah. So, for example, some people who choose to not forgive their mum about certain things, they carry around this injury with every woman. Yeah. Every woman on the planet is going to be the same. They're going to treat every woman on planet as if they're going to be the same as well. So before you even begin any interactions, it's dominated and controlled by the emotion that you haven't forgiven.
And what about this aspect of it, where I end up seeking the company of people who will harm me in the same way and rejecting the company, because I've done this many times. I reject the company of the person who will challenge that false belief within me that other people are going to behave just in the same way as my mum or whatever. Yeah. I push away
in other words, the people who are loving challenge the feeling in you that there are people who are loving, because you don't believe there are.
No.
You think everybody's unloving. Yeah. So somebody who is actually loving, you've got to believe is unloving.
Yes.
You do everything possible to try to make them. You'll even set them up to try to see whether they'll be unloving. You'll even do that. Yeah. Like you'll go to great extremes to prove to yourself your own truth.
It's incredibly sad, and I've been grappling with this a bit lately, where I realise I prefer the pain of the false belief that everyone will hate me or be unloving towards me in a certain way. I live in that. I seek out reinforcement for that. I reject people who might challenge that in me. That feels bad, but I prefer that to the pain that would be triggered in me if I opened up to the people who do love me.
And also opened up to the people who harmed you.
Yeah, and the pain of when I was actually harmed.
Yeah.
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 Because obviously the person who actually loves me is going to present the most contrast to that.
That's right. And that's why they often trigger our sadness the most.
Yes.
And this is why we fight them the most.
And try to set them up to be a baddie.
That's right. We try to make out they are bad.
Yeah.
Because we'd rather not feel the emotion. We'd rather believe something false about them than feel the emotion.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of very distorted, emotionally distorted, psychologically distorted things we do when we don't forgive.
So that really affects those other people as much as it affects me. Those other people can't get to know me. They can't be near me. They're going to have to endure my prejudice.
Yeah, and you're going to be toxic to them.
Yeah.
They're going to know that every interaction with you, you're already presuming the worst about them. You're already making them out to be an ogre, a monster, before you even begin. You're making them out to be the same as the people who harmed you.
And I see this a lot with people who have been harmed in different spiritual movements. It's very, very difficult for them, unless they're willing to feel about that past experience, to accept that you might have any good intentions.
That's right. Yeah. It's impossible for them to even accept it, because they haven't released or forgiven the harm that's already been done. They're not capable of even accepting that someone might be speaking about religion but have good motivations and actually be speaking truth. Yeah. They can't accept it.
Yeah.
It's just remarkable how much psychologically we demand that everybody be the same as what our injury is. And it's a terrible thing we do, but we do it because we're not forgiving.
Yeah. Okay. So in keeping with that, I'll hurt or punish people who have not harmed me. So because I'm not attributing the actual hurt and anger and fear and grief that came from that original episode where I was harmed, then I'm going to project on everyone else, just as we've said, you're going to be the same. Or I'm going to feed the addiction to
continue believing that everyone's going to be this way.
Yeah,
and I sort of feel too here there's this sort of issue of wanting to punish
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
Everybody, isn't there?
There's an addiction to sort of mete out punishment, not upon the person who harmed me, but on innocent people who might remind me of that person. Like,
yes, and can we say that that's a lack of courage?
Yeah.
It's a lack of courage, for one thing, a lack of courage to feel your own emotions. That's all it's about.
Yeah. 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 You see this a lot in gender problems, where people have been harmed by the opposite gender and then they say, that's it. Everyone of that gender is like that, or the same gender sometimes. Yeah. Just as we were mentioning about mothers earlier.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they carry it over into every relationship, into every partnership, into their relationship with their children. They try to turn their children into a better version of what they believe their parent wasn't, and so forth. And it just
causes a lot of gender problems for the child as well.
The poor child is now growing up with all these demands and expectations. You're harming your children doing this, but you think you're turning them into some nice child while you're actually turning them into some very self-destructive and destructive of other people, children.
Yeah.
Who, and this is a constant problem with the cycle of abuse that occurs. Our refusal to forgive perpetrates a cycle.
Yeah.
And while we perpetrate a cycle, the next generation is consigned to have as much harm, if not more, than we ourselves have.
Well, that's our final point here. So my children, or I want to say young people in my environment, will be forced to take on my injuries and may be harmed in the same way that I was, or I might harm them in an additional way.
Or they may perpetrate harm the same way that I was harmed.
Yes.
Because of all sorts of integrating emotions that occur when children are bossed around in this way.
Because they are struggling to develop their own sense of their free will. Sometimes they'll rebel, or they act in a way that they wouldn't have normally chosen to do something, but they're just fighting now the feeling. They don't want to fully experience the feeling of being suppressed and overwhelmed by that. They either act in complete harmony with what the parent wants them to, or in complete disharmony. Neither one is really their true loving self-expression. It's just a way of, it's a result of us as the parent not choosing to forgive and having a very profound impact upon the children around us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The main sins that the average person has to repent for are what they've done to their children.
Yeah.
And honestly, the majority of people on the planet, while they're living here, do not feel they're doing any damage to their children.
No.
And so that's why, oftentimes when we do damage to someone else, we at least have God through the conscience will tell us that the damage there. There are times when we have some sort of conscience-based mechanism that causes us to pause. But when it comes to children, most of us have none of that.
Yeah.
None of that at all, because our children absorb everything without complaint, usually. And it's only once they become teenagers they usually start to complain. And the trouble is, then our behaviour is firmly set by the time they become teenagers. So now we're in complete, competition and even violent disagreement with each other.
Yeah.
So naturally, there's not going to be much resolution in that process either.
Yeah.
So it's a very destructive thing we do when we don't forgive to ourselves and everyone else. And as this section really points out, isn't it, that it affects not only those who we've harmed, or
who've harmed us,
but it affects those who have never hurt us at all.
Yeah.
And yet they are negatively affected by our refusal to forgive. Yeah. The average person on the planet who have sexual dysfunction, the average person, the different people who have different dysfunctional parts of their life, it's all caused by somebody not forgiving.
Yeah. Yeah.
At some point.
At some point.
So
it's incredible.
There's a lot to be said for understanding forgiveness and going through it.
Yeah, and this theme we've been talking about, because we've just been talking in this big long section, the effects of not forgiving, is to weigh up the harm that my lack of forgiveness is doing.
Yeah,
to me, to
others. To correctly assess.
Yes, to want to see that, because that will help us.
Yeah, it will at least, like as I said at the beginning, we've got this sort of pendulum in our minds a lot of the times. And when we look at forgiveness, we have it weighed heavily in we shouldn't do it, it's a bad thing, without assessing all of these negative effects of us
not
refusing to forgive.
Yeah.
If we assessed all the negative effects, it would be like this.
Yeah.
We'd be like, why wouldn't I forgive? Why do I want to continue to engage all these negative effects? So our pendulum would swing into the positive, where we'd go, no, forgiving is essential. I need to do this. And to be honest, until a large majority of people on the planet have that swing, there will be no change on this planet in terms of how we live our lives while we're on Earth.
Yeah.
Until a large, and it doesn't need a majority. It just needs a large number so that the others can see the advantages of it.
Yeah, critical mass.
There needs to be a critical mass. But unless there's a critical mass, then we're going to be like this for while humanity lives on Earth.
Yeah.
They'll be like this. Once they pass, of course, eventually the critical mass does go in that direction.
Yeah.
So in the spirit world, the critical mass for a lot of people has gone in the opposite direction, and then they start to see improvements and whatever, and so there is some shifting on the matter. Yeah. But while on Earth, the critical mass is well and truly entrenched in this, no, I'm not going to forgive. I want the opposite to this. And while that is the case, there is not really going to be any change on the planet at all in terms of our happiness now and the beauty of our life. Yeah. It's going to be much the same as what we have now.
Yeah. And from what you're saying, actually a worsening state.
Well, the reality is over the centuries, men's condition has fluctuated in minor ways. It's gone up a little, down a little, up a little, down a little. But most of the time now it's pretty well established in the hells.
Yeah.
Living life on Earth is pretty much established in the hells. And it's going to remain so until there's a critical mass of people who forgive.
And demonstrate the power of that state.
Yeah. That they actually sincerely go through the state themselves. Yeah. And then they demonstrate the power of that in their lives. Once there's a critical mass of people doing that, now we have the possibility of continual progress and happiness to improvement on the planet.
Well, that probably leads us nicely to our next section, which is going to be about the effects of desiring to forgive.
Yeah.